My name is Nicole, and today I'd really like to share with you guys my story. And I think I'm someone who's, I consider myself someone who's really blessed because I feel like at an early age seeing God's grace in my life has been, it's just been beyond amazing. And He's really shown me my identity in Him. When I was about 2 months old, my birth father left me, and he left me and my mom. And I was brought up in a single-parented family for about 6 years of my life. And so when I was 6 years old, my mom remarried, and now I have an awesome dad. And it's like one of those movies where it goes happily ever after. And I think for myself, I believe that too for a large part. I believe that from that point on, nothing was wrong. I mean, like I have a dad, I have a full family, and to be honest, like not having a dad in the first 6 years of your life, that's not really that big of a deal. I mean, there's a lot of people in Hong Kong who are in divorced families, who kind of feel like they're stuck in these two worlds. But for me, it wasn't really like being stuck in two worlds because I never knew the other world. Like, I don't know my dad's name or what he looks like or anything about him. And so, yeah, I didn't really miss him, so it wasn't really a problem for me growing up. And I think that was kind of a lie that Satan told me, that I kind of grew up believing that, that incident, that my childhood never impacted me. One of the problems I had growing up, one of my really, really huge problems, was I was really like a perfectionist. Like, I would have this, I would always be so like uptight about everything, and I needed to have everything be perfect. Like, I just couldn't bear myself making mistakes. And I think that oftentimes when I made mistakes, I kind of identified myself as a failure. And I think it was a problem that I actually never really noticed I had. Like, I think one of the major things that I was really a perfectionist in was my academic. There was this one time when I wrote an essay, an English essay. Instead of writing in summary, I write in sum. And so my teacher, she gives me a 98% because she's like, oh well, you missed out 3 letters, so I'll take 2% off. And so I take that grade and I dash into the bathroom and I would start crying and crying. And my teacher walks in the bathroom and she's like, you got a 98%, and I'm like, stop rubbing it in my face, Because I was just that kind of kid, that really annoying kid you used to have in class. It was just a really big problem for me. And it wasn't until I was around 15 years old that God really woke me up and showed me that it was a problem and showed me why it was a problem. The year that I was 15 was a really, really interesting year because that was the year that I changed schools. So I used to go to this small-sized Christian school, and I changed to this huge, like, secular school. So it was such a big change. It was also the year where I changed churches. And so at that point, I didn't have any school friends, I didn't have any church friends, and all my old friends started ignoring me. So I was kind of in this lonely phase in my life. And it was really particular because I think God, he's kind of a humorous guy that he picks this kind of period in my life to really show himself to me. So there was this one camp called Resound Camp. I met a few people there. It's in the front row here today. And Resound is basically a Christian youth movement, and they have this camp about once a year. And that year my mom decided she wanted to make me go. And of course, like all moms, like make your kid go to a church event where you have no church friends. She comforted me saying like, oh, it's okay, I'll come with you, which is, it's embarrassing. No, but I love my mom, and I'm so glad she forced me to go. And of course I didn't bring her with me. I went to this camp, and I really didn't expect anything to happen because I felt like, I just want to get this camp over with, go home, just sleep. And I think I told God that. I said, just help me, like, tolerate this weekend. And when I'm there, it progressively got better. So I was at that camp and I started to enjoy it. I started to make a lot of new friends. I started to get really into the worship, and the sermons are kind of funny. But it's really funny because it was the very last day and the very last worship session of that camp where God really spoke to me. And it was right before that worship session I was telling God, oh, thank you for making this weekend so good. You can't get any better now. And of course, you never tell God that without expecting Him to make it better, right? And so we go into that worship session, and we're worshiping, and everything's going fine. And all of a sudden, this song comes up. I don't know if any of you know this song called "Come Away with Me," and it's a really like slow and like mellow song. And this song starts playing, and I start crying, and I have no idea why. And I start crying and crying, and I think during that song, that was when God started to show me the broken sections in my life. He really showed me that when my father left me when I was a kid, that it did make an impact on me. He showed me that I was a perfectionist because I always wanted my dad to love me and to be proud of me. And I always had this burden that I always felt like the reason that he left me was because I wasn't good enough, that I did something wrong, that I wasn't as perfect of a daughter as he wanted me to be, and that's why he left me. And I grew up thinking that, and that's why I always needed to make sure everything was right, so maybe he would come back, or maybe he would look at me and say, oh, I wish I didn't go. And as God started to show these things to me, I started to cry even more. And he showed me this one picture. He showed me this picture of a baby in a crib, and that baby was like pretty helpless, and it was me. And my birth father kind of just walks to the crib, and he takes one look at me, and he takes a suitcase, and he walks out the door. And seeing that picture, that really, really impacted me. And I started crying and crying. And then Jesus said something to me. He said, Nicole, why are you looking for something to replace me when I'm standing right in front of you? I will always love you, and I'll always be there for you no matter what you do. It's not what you do that matters, but it's who I am and my love for you. And at that moment, when he said that, he gave me another picture, and this time it was the same helpless baby. And this time Jesus walks to the crib, and he takes one look at the baby, and he kind of bolts out the door, and then he pins himself on the cross, because he took one look at me and he realized he loved me so, so much that he was willing to give up his entire life for me. And he was willing to die on the cross for me, for everything that I did. He showed me that his love is always enough, that no matter what I do, all the bad things I do, all the mistakes that add up, he'll love me regardless, because I'm his daughter. I'm the daughter of a king. One thing my pastor really loves to say is he says that Satan tries to get you to do something in order to be someone you already are. And I think that's the kind of assumption I was under my entire life, that I always had to do all these good things in order for God to see me as a child, as his daughter, and I do all these good things and not do anything bad in order for him to love me. When at the start, before I was even born, I was already the daughter of God. I was already loved by him, and he was already proud of me. And I think that today, like coming here today, I can tell you that I'm not a perfectionist. But to me, sometimes it's still a habit for me to get into that, mode of, oh, I gotta do everything perfect. But I feel like God really removed some scars in my life. It's like when you have a cut, you have a wound, and you try to put these bandages on top of it to try to cover up the wound. And what I felt like God did at that camp was he really ripped off those bandages and like kind of sewed up my wound. He kind of took all those scars away. And I think that's, to me, that's what God is all about. It's not about it's not about what I do, but it's about who he is and who he'll always be. So I encourage all of you to just, rest in that joy, knowing that God's grace is always enough. Thank you.